And we're live. Welcome back. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us at the one and only Media Maestros Pod. I'm one half of your team, Bram, with the one and only Ray. Ray, my guy, it's been a little minute. How are things going, bro?
Things are going well. I'm excited to get into the summertime. The weather's kind of been up and down recently, but
Yeah.
I'm definitely ready. Once we hit June, start going to the beaches and whatnot.
Yeah.
So that's really what I'm looking forward to. How have you been?
I've been good, man. Trying to maintain. Got a lot of juggling, a lot of hats, but
Mm,
it's been fun, man. It's almost the summer. It's getting warm out. Trying to
that's
work on my
right.
golf game, trying to get on your level.
Okay, yeah. Could hit around sometime.
Yeah, I see you got some new digs, got the new spot looking clean.
New spot, yes, sir. Yeah,
We love to see it,
been here
man. We
for a
love to
little
see
bit.
it.
It's nice.
We love to see it. Well, what you been up to? Anything good you've gotten into recently?
So, I've been trying to get back into my movie game because
Okay,
I have
same,
the
same.
AMC Stub subscription. So I get three
Hmm.
free movies a week. So that's going to be a goal of mine throughout this summer is to actually try to see three movies per week.
AMC
But
hit
so
our
far it's
line for
been,
that. AMC hit our line for that ad money. We love AMC
yes, sir.
stubs.
We love AMC Stubs. But no, I got a chance to see a movie. I think it was about like last week. And it was a movie that I only went into because of the ratings,
Hmm.
because it wasn't something that I was familiar with. I wasn't familiar with pretty much anything that was out at the time, but I wanted to see a good movie. So I checked like the reviews and not the reviews, but the ratings of the
Hmm.
movies that were out, and this one was highly rated. So I was like, might as well check it out. And it's Blackberry. So it's
Now,
the
is that
uh,
Blackberry or Blackberry?
Blackberry, Blackberry, like the phone.
I see. I see.
So it's a story of the founding, the creation, and the rise and fall of the world's first smartphone,
Wow.
predating the iPhone. So it was directed by Matt Johnson, who actually stars in the film, or one of the stars of the film. But it's also starring Jay Baruchel from This Is the End and Glenn Howerton from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's essentially showing this businessman who meets these like tech guys, and they end up starting this company trying to do something completely innovative, putting together email, text, call, all of these things that weren't all together in one place previously and trying to incorporate them all into one device, which was unheard of at the time.
Yeah.
And then working on that, and it's a really interesting story. It's not something that I heard of prior, like the like the drama that went into it. These guys, they get a taste of the money and the fame, and then they get
Hmm.
greedy.
Hmm.
They, you know, the greed grows and the room for failure grows. Bad things start happening, and then, as we know, BlackBerry ended up crashing as one of the lead smartphones, and the iPhone pretty much took over and got the Androids and the Googles later on.
The rest is history.
That's right.
Wow. Now you mentioned that there were some ratings for this movie. Was it highly rated? Do you agree?
Yeah, it was highly rated. I really like this film. I thought it was really well done. They filmed it in kind of a documentary style, which I thought was interesting. Um, Kind of the way you see in like The Office or Parks and Rec, Modern Family, like that kind of documentary style. The acting was really good. The characters were fleshed out to an extent, which I appreciated. And yeah, I think the ratings were pretty accurate with this movie. So I would recommend checking it out if you're into, these kind of um, founding stories and this subject matter.
Man, that's interesting. So you said that the actual creator of BlackBerry is in the film or one of the
Oh no,
creators?
the director of the film
Oh,
is starring in the movie. not
Okay.
not the yeah, but well, yeah, I don't want to spoil anything, but they give that like blurb of what all of the main characters of the film, like how they all ended up, and I was really surprised by what happened to a couple of them. So
Okay.
really
That's a
interesting stuff.
that's a great teaser for us to check it
Yeah,
out.
for
Okay.
sure.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, when you think about this movie kind of being a biopic, were there any other biopics that you would compare it to? Or, I mean,
Oh, that's a great question. So it kind of gives me social network vibes,
okay.
which is a story directed by David Fincher about the creation of Facebook. Also, Tetris, which is a movie that also came out this year, which
Hmm.
was, the game Tetris and how that was uh, uh, became one of the largest games of all time at the time that it was. So it's very similar to those. And I really enjoy a great biopic. Like I could probably drum up like a top five if I had to.
Oh, wow. Okay. We got to do a list now. We got to do a list. Top five. What are you thinking? That's a big one.
Man, there's so many great ones out there. So I would go with Spencer, which is kind of a recent one starring Kristen Stewart. She plays Princess Diana,
Ah,
and the whole film takes place over like a couple of days when she's meeting the royal family and just showing how that went. But it's also kind of surrealistic and like showing her mind state at the time. Really good. Um, I would throw in A Beautiful Mind, which is an
mm,
older film about John Nash, famous mathematician scientist who's dealing with mental illnesses and how that transpired. Um, Remember the Titans
okay.
is a great one. We all know that one. I've seen that a million times.
Love that.
Um, I would throw in Bohemian Rhapsody, which is another recent one with Rami Malek as the frontman of Queen, Freddie Mercury. And then I think that's four. Oh, if I had to round it off, I'd probably go The Aviator, Leonardo DiCaprio, Martin Scorsese. It's a biopic on Howard Hughes,
Okay.
who was someone who was instrumental in designing planes and creating like the infrastructure of planes as we know it today. But he was also going through his own personal issues and how that transpired was interesting to unfold. So I think that's my top five.
Okay. That's a great list. That's a very heavy, a lot of heavy hitters in that list.
A lot of heavy hitters. Do you have any that come to mind?
I've never been. It's funny because I love to read these stories. I
Okay.
love a good autobiography. I love a good memoir. But when it comes to actually watching the biopics, there are only a few I can think of. One that comes to mind that I've seen recently was Rise, story of Giannis Antetokounmpo and his
Oh,
family.
okay.
Disney
Yeah.
Plus special. And that movie, I mean, blew me away. Just his story in and of itself is legendary. So I love
Hmm.
that one. Another one that comes to mind was 127 hours.
Okay.
And it's
Yeah.
kind of a little fuzzy as I remember it, but that's the one with the man who's trapped and he
Yeah.
has to saw off his own leg.
His
And
arm. His arm.
I always get that. Okay, his arm. His arm. Thank you for that. Another one is The Irishman,
Oh,
a
okay. Yeah.
Netflix original, which stars a lot of heavy hitters. And
Heavy.
I mean, heavy, some of the heaviest hitters in that genre. And I love
Absolutely.
that. Beyond that, there are a few more that are on the tip of my tongue that I can't quite get to right now, but you've given a great list. I've tried to sprinkle in a few for those that might want to check out a bit of a different taste,
Mm.
but that's awesome. Okay. Blackberry. Definitely want to check that out.
Yeah. Did you have a movie that you checked out recently?
I did. This was a 2023 special, a movie that came out that I saw on Netflix, but was not straight
Mm.
to Netflix. This movie is called Missing.
Missing. That's right.
It stars Stormy Reed. And
Mm.
for me, I found it to be such a unique take on their typical person gone missing, kind of not necessarily into the wild, but gone without a trace. sort of story. And one thing that I'll say,
Uh, you brought up Into the Wild. That might be one of my favorites. I'm sorry to interrupt,
I
but yeah, Chris McCandless. They made a movie out of the book.
and
That's a great one too.
that's a book we both read a long time
Yeah,
ago.
that's right.
Okay, so that's another one. That was on the tip of my tongue. I guess it regurgitated itself out somehow, somewhat. But Missing was a great film. It takes a very unique approach in storytelling, and also in some of the ways that the director and the filmmakers decided to use kind of everyday objects such as a computer or a phone or a laptop. Without
Mm,
giving too much away, something that I was most impressed by is the fact that every scene of kind of visual film, every instance in which you're looking at a character is shown through a screen.
mm,
So you may see characters through a FaceTime call. You may see
mm,
other characters through a Snapchat story. You may see
mm,
characters through a CCTV cam. And I thought that was so creative and so
mm,
clever in the sense that oftentimes, especially in this day and age, filmmakers struggle with telling unique stories and telling them in a way that really draws people in. But
mm,
I enjoyed the way that the story was told. I think that in a day and age where films can kind of, as I mentioned, regurgitate the same stories, I thought that this was worth the watch, worth the hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes. I thought Stormy Reed did a great job as the lead character. And
mm.
I highly recommend this film to anyone that's interested. Have you heard of it? Have you heard anything about it?
Yeah, I remember seeing the trailers a lot before it came out, and it's one that I have been wanting to watch. I remember thinking that before I watched this one, I wanted to watch the other one, the one that came before it,
Thing
Searching
of searching, yeah.
with John Cho, and because it's actually not similar, but it's kind of the same like idea of like things only being shown through the screen or cameras. I think it's actually made by the same people that made that film.
It was the same director.
And I'm a fan of Storm Reed. I really like her in Euphoria, and
Mhm.
then the Last of Us episode she was in. So I'm interested to see her play like a lead role in something. So I'm definitely gonna check this one out.
I thought she did great. She was also joined by Nia Long, who
Mm,
was who was the co-star, but Stormy Reed definitely carried that role by
mm,
herself. I don't want to give away too much, but she definitely carried that role, did a great job. I want to shout out the directors Nicholas Johnson and Will Merrick.
okay.
They, as you mentioned, also collaborated in Searching, which was
Mm,
about 5 years ago. And I
right.
haven't seen Searching, so I can envision how the two would be similar. But I think this was made, as we saw through the trailers and through its release and its placement now on Netflix, it was made for a larger audience
Mm.
with the efforts to really draw in a lot of the younger crowd that are familiar with Storm Reed and definitely the crowd that supports Nia Long as much as I do. So
Absolutely.
I enjoyed it. Definitely worth the watch.
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna check that one out. Um, so speaking of worth the watch, the series finale of one of the most acclaimed HBO series of recent years came out this past Sunday. And it was a huge moment for me as a huge fan of the show. And it was the series finale of Barry. And
Blackberry.
just Barry. So
Okay, okay.
it's the hit show from HBO. It's it's a show that blends different genres together. It's really interesting. You have the drama, the action, the comedy. The main premise, if I haven't already mentioned already from our HBO episode, it's basically you have this guy who was in the military. He comes home, but he's kind of like mentally still messed up. He gets
Hmm.
trained to become a hitman for hire, essentially. So he's been doing that before we see him in the show.
I
When
see.
we're introduced to him, he wants to pursue acting.
Hmm.
So he takes this acting class, and that's pretty much where everything starts. And the the directions that it ends up going. I mean, as I would say, like the first season, maybe the second season are kind of pretty linear in
Okay.
storytelling. Um, It has kind of a solid structure. But then uh, Bill Hader, who is the creator and lead actor as Barry, his vision just goes in a completely different direction. You have like these singular episodes that are just off the wall and surrealistic, and it leads into this final season, which is in a few different ways a departure from what we've already seen. I've seen kind of the reception to it. A lot of people weren't satisfied with how things ended and how this last season went. I think they were expecting something more clear cut, and that, no, not to sound pretentious or anything, but that does just tend to happen with the masses, where people want like a
Clarity.
clear ending and knowing what happens to all of the characters that they've grown to know over the handful of years. But I was satisfied. I liked not knowing necessarily where every character goes, and then the endings of characters that we did get. I like to analyze and see, like, does this make sense for the story that we were presented? And I think it does. So I think it was a masterfully well done finale, and I think that it was the best of television besides Succession, which also had a series finale on the same day.
Wow.
Um, but so it was a big day for finales. But yeah, Barry, it's going to go down as one of my favorite HBO series, one of my favorite series, perhaps, and I'd I'd recommend checking that one out too.
Wow. A few comments. One, it has to be quite the day for HBO to have two of its greatest shows both conclude on the same day. I mean, what'd you think?
Yeah, it was a lot. It was Succession first. I watched it like, pretty soon when it came out, 9 p.m. And that one was a huge mix of emotions.
Okay.
Like one scene you're like, laughing and smiling. Another scene your heart is ripped out,
Wow.
and it was a lot. And then going to Barry, which is labeled as a comedy. There is nothing comedic about this episode.
Jeez.
It was a lot of um, just conclusions to the storylines that we've seen, and a lot of those conclusions were dark. And yeah, it was a very emotionally draining day for me, I
I can
have to say.
imagine. But
Yeah,
but oftentimes those are the best television and entertainment experiences that we can imagine that make you feel something.
I agree. I definitely agree.
It's interesting as you describe the show, this may be off the wall, but would you liken Barry and its progression in any way to Atlanta? How you mentioned the show started off somewhat linear, somewhat to be expected, but then deviates drastically to get almost surreal, almost uh I don't want to say unrealistic, but just almost surreal to then somewhat intersperse these one-off episodes of different meanings and different thoughts and different approaches. What would you say about that comparison?
Yeah, I think overall, I think they both um, do a good job in going into the abstract realms and not telling, linear stories. And they do kind of follow that similar pattern of it kind of being like it's the premise is realized in the first season. Like exactly what this show is about. And then by the end, it does go kind of all like not necessarily all over the place, but it just goes in different directions. And you have these like singular episodes that just feel like their own thing versus things that kind of tie in as a whole. Barry is a little different from that because you don't have episodes where it's just like characters that aren't in the main story the way that Atlanta did. They had like the few episodes where it was just like just um, kind
Totally
of like
different.
Twilight Zone kind of,
Very, very much so.
you
Great,
know,
great analogy.
esque. But Barry, all of the episodes involve the characters. It's just ridiculous, like just absurd, but still kind of fitting into the main story. So that it's a little different, but similar overall. Yeah.
Okay. Well, two monumental shows concluding on the same day leaves us with a lot to think about. and a lot for someone like me who's never seen Barry to check out.
Yeah. Did you have a show that you would like to mention?
I did. Speaking of finales, I want to talk just briefly about the season finale of Star's number one show, none
Mm,
other than Power Book Two, Ghost.
Ghost. Okay.
Did you watch Power, the original kind of book?
I probably watched a handful of season or episodes from the first season. That's about it.
I watched a handful of episodes and then I was completely drawn in.
Wow. Okay.
Power is much more, it resembles much more of what our parents and grandparents knew to be soap opera TV than
Mm,
some other shows, but I enjoy it. I enjoy the spinoff of the first series, which now follows the original main character's son, Tariq,
hmm
who has somewhat taken on his father's nickname of Ghost. And the show, I thought this season in particular began to take some steps beyond where I think the other seasons and other shows of a similar realm somewhat check out. I think the show starts to get a bit more into the characters' emotions, a bit more
Okay.
into the characters' underlying, how can I say, their underlying motivations, as
Mm,
opposed to just the kind of static, this character is a bad guy, this character is a good guy. The show begins to peel those layers back a bit deeper. I will say, don't go into this show expecting any monumental revelations.
okay.
Don't. Similar to some of the shows and movies we've discussed in the past, at times you may have to turn your brain off. But I think if you want to watch something that's somewhat along the lines of action, a little bit of comedy, a little bit of romance, a little bit of excitement,
Hmm.
I think it's worth the watch. This past weekend was the season finale of season three, and at times the show did jump in and out in between absurdity and
Mm,
realism.
okay.
But I think sometimes you need a little bit of absurdity and you need a little bit of foolishness.
Mm.
And I think it was worth the watch. It's worth the hour and a half.
So, how would you compare this iteration to the original Power, as far as quality, as far as um, the thrills? Like, how would you compare that?
I think that's a great question. And as I compare the two, I think the original Power was, it had its highs, which were very high. I think this being the sequel has, as most sequels do, the added pressure of having to, or at least wanting to exceed the previous effort. I think this show does a good job in trying to make it its own product.
Mm,
The fact that at times the original show found itself wanting to up the previous surprise or do things even grander than they did in the past. I think this show tries a bit more to go deeper into each character. And as I
okay.
mentioned, their motivations and what makes them them rather than just trying to add the next twist or turn at every corner. So when I think about the viewing experience, I personally would even go as far as to say I enjoy this one better than the first. I think for
Mm,
some they may prefer the first or may have enjoyed the experience watching the first better because it was our first time experiencing it. But me personally, I enjoy this iteration. I enjoy the characters a bit more, and I enjoy the direction that the show writers and showrunners have decided to take this season and as a whole this series.
mm.
So if you enjoyed Power even the slightest bit, I encourage you to check out Ghost Book Two. If you didn't, no harm, no foul. This won't be for you. And that's
Yeah,
all right. That's all right.
that's all right.
Well, Ray, what about any music? Anything you're listening to lately that's really caught your ear?
So, I do want to shout out an album that I listened to a couple years ago,
Okay.
and I was revisiting it because I'm actually planning on seeing this artist live um, pretty soon. And the artist goes by the name of Genesis Owusu, and the
Okay.
album is titled Smiling with No Teeth.
Okay.
So yeah, this is an album that came out a couple years ago. He's a newer artist. This was actually his debut album. Um, and it's experimental, it's
Okay.
alternative, but it's based in hip hop. You know, I would consider him as a rapper in a
Okay.
sense, but it's reminiscent of artists like Death Grips
Hmm.
or JPEG Mafia, Channel Tress, that kind of like hip hop based but experimental alternative. vibe, indie as well. And this album really shows his versatility. You get to see, a lot of different sounds, a lot of different vibes as far as, you'll have, kind of more of like a traditional hip hop song, but then you'll have like something that you might hear off of like Yeezus, and then you'll have something that's like more indie. And it's really dope. It's politically charged. So there is like a lot of substance underneath the songs. Um, I wouldn't necessarily say it's like fully conceptual, but it's thematic.
Okay.
And I appreciated the overall theme that he had um, in tackling the subject matter, but still making it musical and interesting to listen to. So I definitely want to shout that out. An underrated, a budding artist. Um, they had a couple songs like I Don't Need You kind of buzzed a little bit. He also has a song Get Inspired that was an ad for some company, I forget which one, but so his notoriety is increasing over the past couple years, but I would love to see more from this artist for sure.
Okay. Genesis Owusu.
That's right.
Okay, I like that. I love the sound of that. When you think about this artist, you mentioned some comps that I think I'm not as underground. So I think a lot of those went over my head. Are there
Okay.
who would be the most mainstream artist you could compare him to?
So I did mention Yeezus, so I guess there might be some Kanye influence, particularly in that
That John,
part
that
of
realm.
yeah,
Okay.
maybe a little bit of Tyler, Brockhampton,
Okay.
and, just hip hop artists that are more on the experimental or alternative side.
Okay. That's dope. Smiling with no teeth.
Yep.
You heard it here first in Media Maestros. That's all right. Well, it wouldn't be the Media Maestros if we
Nope.
didn't leave you without a blast from the
The
past.
past.
And this, I like that. I like that.
We
We're
should
gonna
do
get it.
that.
We're gonna get it. We're gonna get it. Tune into the next episode to see if we can pull that off. And speaking of this episode, and as you know, we lost a great in the
Mhm.
entertainment industry not too long ago. So, in honor of that, this week's blast from the past is none other than What's Love Got to Do with It? Thinking of our biopic segment, this film came out in 1993, starring none other than the great Angela Bassett.
Mm,
And this film details the life of Tina Turner and the legacy she had growing up from a relatively unknown young woman into one of the greatest musical stars of a generation. Someone who transitioned the way that music and the way that stars could be stars, someone that paved the way for great artists such as Beyonce, Pink, someone that changed the way that concerts and music as a whole was seen as a way to express yourself thematically, but also boldly. So
mm,
please check out this biopic, What's
mm.
Love Got to Do with It? A film that tells a great story of a great woman who endured many hardships, but showed great perseverance, great courage, and in turn left a great legacy. Right? Any thoughts, any comments?
Yeah, it's a classic film. Great acting performance by Angela Bassett and depicting a once in a lifetime performer of Tina Turner.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. And with that sound, nothing else left to be said. We thank you all for joining us once again for the Media Maestros. On behalf of Ram and the one and only Ray, we thank you for your views. We thank you for your listens. Thank you for your watches. Until next time, peace.
See y'all.